I think it's dangerous to do anything but yell bingo when you see all of those buzzwords put together on the slide there. I think, clearly buying and connecting with people is what programmatic does today from a workflow point of view. I mean, when you say search is the original, these are largely workflow mechanisms to enable buyers to find what they're after and connect. What we're not doing yet is experiencing a proficiency in all of these channels that can get you to a place where you can truly start to connect the dots in a strong, meaningful way.
So being able to optimize based on what's working best and optimize your budget towards that, rather than just saying, hey, I think we should be within search, I think this is what we should do. But if you're noticing that social is working better or whatever it may be for the client based on what their goals are, you have the ability to shift back and forth and maximize what's working best.
So let's talk about another benefit and challenge is this idea of how machine learning is really impacting, that's basically what programmatic is supposed to be solving for.
Right.
Chris, you've got some...
Yeah, I mean, we come at this from an entirely different way, I think, than everyone else up here, in that we do not use cookies in any targeting that we do. We believe everything is about the conversation a brand and a user can have in an environment at that moment. So if you're going to do that, if you're not going to be dependent on all of these preconceived notions or latent data points, the way you have to do that is to use machine learning. And so we think about it in two ways. We call it exploit and explore. And what we're trying to do for brands is some percentage of the time exploit the locations across the 1,000 different publishers we work with where we know audience have engaged with like content. They've expressed intent that's relevant to them and they would match the person who's just landed on those pages. But 20% of the time or so, we want to explore new environments that may or may not have made sense. And I think you talk about machine versus human. A lot of times we have this bias around endemic inventory that we know should work for a brand. And when we can explore and find new pockets of users who have not been exposed to a brand, that's incredibly valuable. And we do the same thing around creative. We know there are better performing creatives that work, and so we want to lean on those heavily, but we always want to explore new creative mechanisms through the system so that any user who's getting exposed, these reach and frequency concerns, especially as we strive for omni-channel and we try to get across, we can do a better job telling the story based on both the landing spot that they've reached, whatever that pub may be, but also who they are and what their motivation in the moment may be.
The way that omnichannel works going forward in this utopian world is when you are taking signals and making dynamic changes to creative in real time and simultaneously making decisions around what media you want based upon what the circumstances are.
I think the question is how you define more performance against the cost associated with that. And when you work in a single channel, that may work. The question becomes, though, to the omni-channel part of this, when I start overlaying data, the data that I value today on desktop, which is predominantly cookie-driven, how will that play when I start taking TV data? Or when I start taking mobile fingerprint data? How will those data sets that I value today in one way look?
The challenge is, how do you identify which of those data sources are most relevant to you? How do you do it in a way that does not dramatically limit how many people you reach? And the final challenge around this is, how do you use this data consistently across all the supply sources that you're trying to reach? Because if every different exchange allows you to only use a specific data source, then you're not able to have a consistent delivery across all supply sources. Right. And one of the things that we try to do with a Bright Roll DSP is enable you to use the same segments across all supply sources, right, both on our exchange and on other exchanges. And I think that's a very important trend that we should all be aspiring to. Right.
I think we have to be careful as an industry to take learnings that are not of enough scale and apply statistical relevance to them and pretend like they actually have informed something that should shape the way our business operates at a great deal. Until you're dealing with billions, and whether you're a Yahoo or a Google or a Facebook or maybe even a LinkedIn, until you get to that scale, it's really hard on an individual brand level to make these determinations. So before you start adding more of these different channels together, I think it's really important organizationally for brands and agencies to get what is clearly the dominant life-changing channel as it pertains to all those who have the devices in the mobile channel right.